Boom! Ha! Gotcha. Hello, hello! So as I'm recording this, it's currently October. And you know what that means, right? It's the spooky month, the month of Halloween. And as such, I'll be reviewing a horror game. Now, as probably half of my subscribers know, all 5 of you,
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I'm completely terrified of anything related to the horror genre, but that's not gonna stop me from reviewing Maid of Sker, a game set in the late 19th century and it's based on Welsh folklore, which I know nothing about. So if I get anything wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments down below. Hey, it's me from the future, just letting you know that some of the gameplay footage I'll be using is going to be taken from a stream that I did because I don't really want to play through 2 hours of the game again for b-roll footage. So yeah, just a heads up. Maid of Sker is a first-person horror game developed by Willows Interactive, which is known for games such as Late Shift and The Bunker. Loosely inspired by an old story of the same name, the game takes place in the fictional Sker Hotel, which is based on the real-life Sker house located in Wales. Legend has it that the house is haunted by 2 ghosts, one of a captain and the other of a woman who died of a broken heart after being locked in her room by her father. Damn, that's brutal. Before we get into the actual game itself, I'm just gonna get this out of the way now. I am not gonna talk about the story too much because it's a relatively short game, around maybe 3 or 5 hours depending on how fast you are. I believe that talking about certain plot points in the game will completely spoil the entire story and probably ruin your experience, so I'm just gonna try to keep it as vague as possible. So you play as a musician named Thomas who came to Scare Hotel in order to rescue his beloved Elizabeth Williams, whose letter to the protagonist states that something dark is brewing inside Scare Island and that she's being kept against her will. At first, the real reason behind Elizabeth's confinement is kept under wraps, and this is done on purpose. The only thing you know at the start of the game is that you've written a melody that Elizabeth needs in order to counter some sort of curse. A counter song, if you will. Naturally, the story unfolds as you progress through the game, and in order for you to piece together just exactly what's going on in the hotel, bits of information are fed to you through various means, such as notes, newspapers, gramophone recordings, and even phone calls from Elizabeth herself.
My father made recordings on brass cylinders of a song, a strange melody that affects the mind. If all of the cylinders are played together on the harmonium, this madness will end. You need to find them and bring them to me.
Now, of course, you can always just ignore all of that and somehow stumble your way into the ending. But what's the fun in that? I mean, unless you're a speedrunner, of course, then knock yourself out. I'm just gonna leave it at that for now, since again, most of the fun is uncovering the mystery behind Elizabeth's predicament and her, let's just say, wildly eccentric family. Right off the bat, you'll immediately notice that the game itself is very atmospheric, from the lush forests surrounding the Grand Hotel to the mysterious hallways in the building itself. Maid of Sker is just full of wonderful visuals. On top of that, the soundtrack is beautifully eerie, and the game starts off with a unique take on what I believe is an actual Welsh song. Unfortunately, you probably won't be able to appreciate the visuals as much because you'll be spending most of your time trying to dodge enemies in rather claustrophobic environments. Speaking of enemies, the gameplay is probably the weakest aspect of the game, and by no means does that make it bad, it's just really tedious because for the most part you're completely defenseless and you have to rely on stealth to survive. As much as I enjoyed the narrative being presented, the enemies are just more annoying than terrifying, really. I mean, from the very first encounter, you'll immediately realize that what you're facing is essentially just a bunch of cultists with bags over their heads, and they can barely hear you unless you're literally breathing down their necks. I started out terrified because I didn't know what I was up against. But now that I know what I'm up against and how to avoid them, it's just so dumb. Like, why was I even scared in the first place? This isn't scary. This is just annoying. Like, they had me. They had me at the start. Like, oh, this is scary. This is kind of unsettling. And now it's just... What makes them more annoying is that, while they do all seem to follow a certain path, they all grow increasingly omniscient the closer you get to them. So for example, if you're hidden, and trust me, you'll know whether or not they see you, they just sometimes decide to walk straight towards you, conveniently stopping just before they get within range to actually detect you and trigger a chase sequence. In addition to that, in a futile attempt to make the game more difficult, the further you are in the story, I guess the devs just decided to throw a bunch of the same blind assholes right in your face, just more and more of them. And they're not actually doing anything different with these enemies, they're all just the same blind men walking around, no variations whatsoever. The puzzles, on the other hand, were actually quite enjoyable, though admittedly they're incredibly easy to solve as long as you're paying attention to your surroundings. There's really not much else to say about them. Just don't be an idiot like me who got stuck in a certain point in the game because I wasn't looking at the clues that were staring me right in the face. Okay. I get it. I get the puzzle. Okay, let's see. British Bulldog. What's this? Scare Hotel. Okay. So you got British Bulldog, Scare Hotel, the dragon thingy, and Queen Victoria. Oh, I can see that from there though. Okay. I'm gonna go back to the kitchen. I get it now. I get it! I got the puzzle. Once you reach a certain point, the game temporarily veers away from its slow-paced stealth gameplay as you face off with a brute who will relentlessly hunt you down. He's basically Mr. X from Resident Evil 2, except he's much more unfair because he knows exactly where you are, no matter how far you are from him.
Stop right there, criminal scum! Stop right there, criminal scum!
Why you bully me?
It's a welcome change of pace, and though not entirely original, is still an interesting concept. However, as with the other enemies in the game, dealing with him feels more like a chore and less like a challenge. The game has multiple endings. Well, it has 2 endings, and trust me, that's not a spoiler, it becomes really obvious when the story is about to end. I mean, as long as you're paying attention to the notes and the recordings scattered throughout the hotel, the game pretty much slaps you across the face and says, hey, do this. Do this to get the good ending. Now, I love Wales Interactive, and I'm probably gonna cover another one of their games in the near future, but Maid of Sker, despite its compelling story, it kinda falls flat as a horror game. I applaud them for not relying too much on cheap jump scares like most indie titles seem to be doing nowadays. And like I said earlier, the entire setting is very atmospheric, and it gives off a really eerie vibe that makes you wonder, is there something waiting for me behind that corner? Unfortunately, the second you meet your first enemy, the sense of fear completely fades away. I mean, you just look at them and you go, oh, I just have to walk past a bunch of blind men. And it's not just that they're blind, you can literally walk alongside them as long as they're not too close and you're holding your breath. Because if there's one thing louder than shoes on wooden floorboards, it's breathing. The story itself is pretty good. It borrows from both Welsh and I believe Greek mythology, though I'm not really going to say anything more because that's also a bit of a spoiler. You'll figure it out relatively early in the game anyway. Overall, I still think that it's an admirable attempt at horror, and I did genuinely enjoy learning more about the game's world through the various notes and stuff. I feel like all it lacks is the sense of fear and urgency that the other titles in the genre have, because the game doesn't really force you to hurry up despite Elizabeth's cries for help.
Thomas, you have to hurry for both our sakes.
The game doesn't really give you much of a choice. It just tells you to avoid all of the countless blind dickheads roaming the establishment, since you don't have any means to fight back. Except for that one object, but I'm not going to talk about it. I didn't even use it throughout the entire game, except for probably the part with discount Mr. X. Anyway, that's it for Maid of Sker. It's available on these platforms, and it isn't particularly expensive, so I urge you to actually buy the game and support the devs. That's gonna be it for me. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or just leave me a thumbs up from behind your screens. I'm probably gonna cover, I don't know, maybe a roguelite next time. We'll see. I'm gonna browse my library first. So yeah, anyway, I'll catch you guys later. Very obvious, right? Story of good dogs barking.